If you have taken any kind of ancient history class anywhere, you will know that there is extensive information about pottery, including time period, art, style, form, culture, you name it. Through preserved pottery and even shards, historians can begin to determine different facts, from who the pottery comes from, to when, and to what they may have been used for. Now, I will be honest and tell you that going into the subject of pottery in detail will take a ridiculous amount of time, so I will only go into discussion of specific areas, including time period, specific art style, that connect to the Minoans, and possibly outside as well. Connecting to the Journeyman Project 3 Legacy of Time, let's examine pottery that may have been found around in 1262 BCE. Its connection to Minoan culture, as well as what kinds of pottery have been unearthed in excavation sites on the island of Theran. In terms of time period, the pottery that would be present would fall in the late Minoan period, between 1500 and 1100 BCE, or in the terms of the Mycenaeans, who later took over, the late Helletic period, 3B, from between 1320 to 1190 BCE. As there may be connections to Minoan culture with Atlantis, what is displayed in Legacy of Time may be accurate. With the Minoans, there was a rise of the palace culture of the old palaces of Knossos and Phaistos, and their new type of urbanized, centralized society with redistribution centers requiring more storage vessels, and ones more specifically suited to a range of functions. In palace workshops, standardization suggested more supervised operations and the rise of elite wares, emphasizing refinements and novelty, so that palace and provincial pottery become differentiated. The best wares were designed for table and service. In the palace workshop, the introduction from the Levant of the potter's wheel in Middle Minoan period 1B enabled perfectly symmetrical bodies to be thrown from swiftly revolving clay. The well-controlled iron red slip that was added to the color repertory during Middle Minoan period 1 could be achieved only in insulated, closed kilns that were free of oxygen or smoke. There are a few different classes of pottery, generally separated into two main sections, utilitarian and elite. Utilitarian pottery is generally plain wares, sometimes with decorations, made for functional, domestic use, and constitutes the bulk of the pottery made. Elite pottery is finely made and elaborately decorated with great regard for detail. This form of pottery is generally made for holding precious liquids and for decoration. The use of pithoi were also in high demand. Liquid and granular necessities were stored in pithoi located in magazines or storage rooms and elsewhere. Pithoi made their earliest appearance just before the Middle Minoan 1 period and continue into the late Minoan period, becoming very rare by late Minoan 3. About 400 pithoi were found at the Palace of Knossos. An average pithos held about 1,100 pounds of fluid. Perhaps because of the weight, pithoi were not stored on the upper floors. Pithoi are a great example for the function of pottery. Vessel function can be broken down into three main categories: storage, transformation or processing, and transfer. These three categories can be further broken down by asking questions such as, is it carrying hot or cold temperatures? Is the substance a liquid or a dry substance? What is the frequency of transactions for the pottery, or how often is it going to be moved? What is the duration of the use? And how far of a distance is the pottery going to go? During the late Minoan period, there were many intricate styles in place, including the floral style. Fluent movemented designs were drawn from flower and leaf forms, painted in reds and black on white grounds, in steady development from the Middle Minoan period, where there is said to have been an age of efflorescence, which had vegetation scenes, and also depicting palms and papyrus, with various kinds of lilies and elaborate leaves. It appears in both pottery and frescoes. Another form of pottery also emerged, called the raita, a container from which fluids were intended to be drunk or to be poured in some ceremonies, such as libation. The conical raiton form has been known in the Aegean region since the Bronze Age. However, the Minoans had special ornate raita, such as the bull's head raiton, Other Rhyton discovered seem to have been used for specific circumstances, such as the Harvester Vase from Hagia Triada, another ancient Minoan settlement which depicts a harvest procession, the Chieftain Cup depicting a coming-of-age rite, the Boxer Rhyton showing boxing scenes, and the Sanctuary Rhyton, depicting a peak sanctuary to the Mistress of Animals and featuring birds and leaping goats, and others. The marine style also emerged, where the entire surface of a pot was covered with sea creatures, such as an octopus, fish, and dolphins, against a background of rocks, seaweed, and sponges. The marine style was the last purely Minoan style. Towards the end of the late Minoan 1B period, all the palaces except for Knossos were violently destroyed, as were many of the villas and towns. Now, let's try to connect the Minoans to the findings on Thera, such as in Akrotiri. Fortunately to historians, it seems that the eruption of Thera acted in the same way like Pompeii. The volcanic materials covered the entire island, but the buildings and their contents had been protected. Historians note that Thera was at a crossroads on trade routes, and this made it easy and also advantageous for the island to accept the wares of potters of other regions, which may mean that local production stagnated. The various imported objects found in the buildings indicate the wide network of its external relations. For instance, Akrotiri was in contact with Crete, but also communicated with the Greek mainland, the Dodecanese, Cyprus, Syria, and Egypt. The impact of trade on Thera may have been felt from the 5th century BCE onward, which means that anything beforehand could be attributed to Theran craftsmen. The earliest art form found in ancient Thera is pottery from the geometric period. This period goes back to as far as 1050 BCE. The geometric style of decorating pottery has been popular since Minoan times. Pottery that used this style was usually strict and simple, having a few written geometric shapes, usually concentric circles or semicircles, but the most characteristic element of geometric art was the meander, a decorative border constructed from a continuous line, shaped into a repeated motif. In terms of connecting Thera to Atlantis and also the Minoan culture, using art, architecture, and style, there are significant connections that can be made. However, more findings and more concrete evidence need to be presented before further claims can be confidently made.